Rafael Devers gave it his all in the 2024 season for the Boston Red Sox, despite fighting through an apparent injury all season long. What does that mean for him in 2025?
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And the best part is it is all completely free, so you might as well check it out because Locked On is your team every single day. This episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com? Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. Welcome to the show. Happy Monday. I already miss Red Sox baseball. It hasn't been that long since they haven't played, and even though the season was incredibly frustrating, I definitely still do find myself missing it and wishing I could watch some Red Sox baseball right about now, especially in the heart of the playoffs when it's getting really exciting. I mean, Mets won an absolute thriller yesterday against the Phillies, and 2 American League Division series on deck for today, which hopefully will be good games as well. And it definitely just feels like we're missing out. And hopefully we don't have to have that feeling of missing out anymore. I mean, Alex Cora said it's time to give back to the fans because we've given so much to the organization for so long. So now it's time for them to help us. And Craig Breslow mentioned that he knows they need to revamp the bullpen. So it seems like they recognize that they haven't put enough into the team over the last few seasons as a whole organization. So now they're going to hopefully try and do what they need to do to fix this team so that it can be in contention again next year. But while we're thinking about next year's Red Sox team and who's going to be part of that puzzle next year and all the decisions that are looming for this team, Rafael Devers is somebody who's a constant. He signed a big contract extension with the Boston Red Sox, and he's somebody who is here to stay. And the question with Devers becomes, does he stick to playing third base and they don't bring in a third baseman, or do they try to trade Masataka Yoshida, maybe have Devers move to DH and bring in another third baseman in the offseason? That's all going to be questions that we're going to be asking throughout the course of this offseason. But one thing about Devers that impressed me with his 2024 season was the way he was able to push through an apparent shoulder injury that he was dealing with all season long. So I'm going to be going over on today's show all things Rafael Devers, talking about his 2024 season, how it's going to affect his 2025 season, and how a healthy Devers could impact the Red Sox playoff chances in 2025. So in 2024, Rafael Devers played the majority of the games. I mean, he rested for some games because of his injury, but he took up 525 at-bats for this Red Sox team, even though he had this shoulder thing that was bothering him. And he recorded 143 hits, hit 28 home runs, and batted .272 with 87 runs scored, 83 RBIs, and 3 stolen bases. On the season, his on-base percentage was a .354, slugging was a .516, and OPS was an .871. So when you look at those numbers directly, you say, okay, yeah, that's a pretty decent season that he did have, not quite all-star caliber of a level of numbers that he was putting up in terms of what you would think from Devers. But generally, you look at those numbers and you say, okay, yeah, that's pretty decent. So then you think about the fact that he had this shoulder issue come up during spring training. And this was something that he has been trying to fight through since then to try to get himself back on track to be able to contribute to this Red Sox team in the best way possible. And throughout the course of the season, he was still dealing with this nagging shoulder thing, and it was getting to the point where he couldn't handle the pain anymore. The Red Sox were still making him play every day because they wanted a chance at a playoff spot until eventually, towards the very end of the season, when the Red Sox playoff chances were all but gone at that point, then they said, okay, Devers, we will give you the rest of the season to rest your shoulder and go through whatever recovery process you need to go through so that you can be good to go for next season. So I'm glad they're doing that. But what I worry about, and that I hope isn't the case, is that they pushed him too much and it's going to end up pushing his timeline back for when he can come back. Because the last thing we want is for Devers to miss time in 2025. I mean, he is the heart of the Red Sox lineup. Let's just face it. He's the guy you want up the majority of the time in a lot of situations. And while Devers in 2024 struggled in big situations, like with runners in scoring position, and he wasn't able to come through in those situations, don't you think he would have been able to come through more often in those situations if he was healthy? Because we've seen him do it numbers of times in the past. And this season, despite it being an off year for him, he still put together a decent season in terms of his numbers. So I just hope that they didn't push this too far to the point where there's going to be surgery involved and then he ends up missing half the season because of recovering. And that's why a little bit earlier than they pulled the plug was when I declared they should let Rafael Devers sit for the rest of the season. And I get the mindset of the Red Sox not wanting to give up because they felt like a playoff spot was still within reach for them. So they wanted to continue to play Devers to give themselves a chance moving forward to be able to get that playoff spot until they were mathematically eliminated. So I do understand the logic behind all of that. But I just wish they had pulled the plug a little bit earlier because now I do worry that they pushed him a little bit too far. But we're just going to have to see as the offseason progresses how things go there. But looking back on his 2024 season, it's hard to really complain about a lot of what he did, especially considering the fact that he was playing through this injury that was really bothering him for the course of the entirety of the season. I mean, he got the job done the majority of the time. He hit 293 against right-handed pitchers and 240 against left-handed pitchers, so he definitely could increase that number against lefties, but so can a lot of these players in the Red Sox lineup. And you look at the lineup now, and some guys are absolutely abysmal against lefties, so at least that wasn't the case with him, but definitely could use an increase in that number. I mean, he only hit 4 home runs against left-handed pitching on the season as opposed to 24 versus right-handed pitching. So the power is definitely still there. If he was fully healthy, I think he would have been on pace to hit a lot more home runs. He still had the power despite the fact that he was hurt, but what was holding him back was the fact that he struggles to hit left-handed pitching and also the fact that his shoulder couldn't seem to get itself under wraps. And you have to wonder how many games he was playing through absolute pain because that's a hard thing to do. And it's hard to be effective at the plate for anybody when they're feeling like they're in that much pain. So you have to wonder where exactly that pain came from, when he would feel this way, if it was doing warm-ups for a game, if it was in the middle of the game when he was putting a lot of physical work into his body by trying to swing the bat and throw the ball, make plays at third base. You have to wonder exactly when that pain would kick in on a day-to-day basis, but it definitely would kick in for him. And it's hard to really say that he wasn't overall effective. I mean, yes, he could have done better in situations where there were runners on base because in a lot of those situations, he wasn't able to come through this year, but I'm choosing to withhold my judgment a little bit on that because he has been effective with that in the past. And also, by the way, he hit well at home this season. He hit 301 at home versus 247 on the road. And yes, those numbers are pretty drastic of a difference. He definitely needs to get better with hitting on the road. But considering the fact that the Red Sox overall struggled at Fenway this year, he hit above 300 at Fenway. And that's a huge thing for the Red Sox when you look back at their numbers at home as a team versus away. He really was the guy who was the source of a lot of the offense that the Red Sox produced at Fenway. And that's obviously a great sign moving forward, given that he's a guy who's going to be the heart of this team for years to come now. You want him to be the guy that is hitting well on your home turf. So that's another thing to note with Rafael Devers. And when you look back on his season as a whole and the numbers he put together, I cannot say that I'm upset with it. I'm upset more of the fact that he was hurt and felt like he had to play through that injury and kept putting all of this physical stamina on his body, and it can get exhausting if your body's in that situation. So I definitely give him credit for playing through it. I just hope that it doesn't cause longer term damage, because the Red Sox are absolutely going to need him if they want to make a run in 2025. And coming up, I'm going to be talking about what the keys are going to be for Rafael Devers to see that success next year and beyond. For most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on like a Luka, Ellie De La Cruz, or Patrick Mahomes rookie card just isn't in the cards. I love collecting, but that's some serious money to drop. Thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, now it's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of their retail price. Every card that I listed was hit from last week's Arena Club slab pack drop. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and clear hit rates for each one. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. After your pulls are revealed, they'll immediately be placed in your showroom for safekeeping, selling, trading, or auction. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/LockedOnMLB and use code LockedOnMLB. That's arenaclub.com/LockedOnMLB, code LockedOnMLB for 10% off your first purchase. It is great and worth investing in. I'm telling you, my fiance loves collecting baseball cards from older players all the way up to current players. And he's currently, right now, as we speak, on arenaclub.com purchasing some cards. So you definitely won't be disappointed if you utilize it. The Boston Red Sox are a team that relies heavily on guys panning out that are in their system. And in order for the Red Sox to justify that approach that they're taking, or that they seemingly have taken over these last few seasons, they need their superstars to pan out also. And those superstars include Rafael Devers, who is the face of the franchise, somebody that they're looking to lead the team moving forward, and somebody who is going to naturally produce a lot of offense because he has a big bat to produce in the middle of the Red Sox lineup. If they want to have all these young guys on the team that are going to come up and are going to be part of the long-term plan, they need to have their number one guy being at his best all the time. And unfortunately, Devers was not able to be at his best all the time in 2024 because he had a nagging injury in his shoulder that prevented him from succeeding in the way that the Red Sox needed him to succeed. And it was a bummer because we would have loved to see a lot more from Devers, but it's hard to really blame him for what went on because of the fact that he has his own things going on. Like, at the end of the day, he's a human being outside of baseball, and everybody doesn't handle pain well, physical pain, especially when you're a professional athlete. And if he was feeling this pain in his shoulder every day, imagine trying to go out there and swing a baseball bat at the same rate that you always do. It's not easy. And for Devers, it certainly wasn't. And it was evident that when he would struggle, there was something that was very off about him. So that was the biggest thing for me this year with Devers that I saw, was just that he wasn't fully healthy. I definitely need him to be better in the clutch. And when there's runners on base, he needs to be able to hit a little bit better, but he was hitting really well early on in counts. So when it was the first pitch, he was hitting 373. He was hitting 394 in a 1-0 count, 333 in a 2-0 count, 500 in a 3-0 count, and 546 in an 0-1 count. So it goes to show that there wasn't really that much of an issue with him when he was behind in the count. He would continue to hit well even when he was down a strike. In a 1-1 count, he was only hitting 238 and 250 in a 2-1 count. Some of the lower numbers were when he was in a hole, like in a 1-2, he would hit 165, 186 in a 2-2 count, and 171 in an 0-2 count. So he definitely could use a little bit of work when he's behind 2 strikes. Those 2 strike pitches are something that the Red Sox used to be able to feed off of a lot, and they had a lot of good 2-strike hitters on the team, but they didn't really have a lot of that in 2024. So I'd love to see Devers be one of those guys who steps up in 2-strike counts and be able to hit the ball deep and at least be able to get himself on base. So those were numbers that really stood out to me. And the thing with Devers was when there were 2 outs in the inning, he was only hitting 227 as opposed to 318 with nobody out and 275 with 1 out. So again, situational hitting of when there are 2 outs in the inning and there's runners on base, can he get that number up a little bit more? Because again, for example, when there was a runner on third with 2 out, he was only hitting 138. He was hitting 273 in general with men on base, with runners in scoring position, just 226. So this is what I mean about Devers not necessarily being able to be that effective with runners on base and with the Red Sox having an opportunity to score those runners. So big thing about his game that needs to change in 2025. And the question is going to be, what are the biggest keys for him to succeed in 2025? I mean, a lot of it is those mechanical things, like how are you adjusting your approach at the plate when there's more pressure on you to come through and deliver, when you have somebody in scoring position that you're trying to drive in? How are you changing your approach when there's 2 strikes in the count? Are you swinging at the next pitch no matter what? Or are you hanging in there trying to foul off the ball and make some sort of contact to stay in the count? Or are you just waiting and hoping that it misses the strike zone? There's lots of different approaches that he can take, but is he going to adjust that approach? Because if he can adjust a little bit when there's runners in scoring position or he's down 2 strikes in the count, he's going to be a lot better of a hitter. And yes, the injury plays a big role in that, like I mentioned before. But another big thing for him in 2025 is going to be exactly that, staying healthy, making sure the shoulder thing is completely under wraps, because this is the time now where it's the off season to really go in and figure out what the problem is and make sure that he is set to go for next season at the start of the season, because you don't want to go into the season and have this still be bothering him and the doctors feel like it's fine, but then he's going into the season battling this shoulder issue once again. They need him to be that heart of the lineup. In order for him to have a successful 2025 season, he needs to be the guy in the Red Sox lineup that they are talking about potentially having an MVP caliber campaign, definitely being in the conversation to be an all-star, definitely being a guy who the other players can look up to from an offensive standpoint and say, hey, Devers is constantly producing. I want to be like that too. They need him to be that guy in 2025, and he can absolutely be that guy. He just needs to be able to make sure that he's healthy and that he's adapting at the plate when he faces situations where he's in a hole in the count and needs to come back from it. So his hits that he did get this year, the majority of them were when he was hitting up the middle or to the opposite field. Those were a lot of times where he was hitting the ball when he did get a hit and he would get it to roll through. But to the infield, he was only batting .03 because if the ball was hit lightly to the infield, he likely would record an out because he wasn't that fast. So he wasn't like Jaron Duran who could beat that type of play out. And he wasn't hitting a lot of balls to the infield in general because Devers has the power. It's something that he's always had throughout the course of his career, is that he can hit the deep ball, and he's not as much a hitting for contact hitter, but rather a hitting for power hitter, a home run type of guy that the Red Sox look for, that they need in the middle of that lineup, because they have a lot of contact hitters, but not as many who could hit home runs on a consistent basis. And that's something that he has been good at throughout his entire career so far. When you look at the other teams in the division and what they did, how does Devers stack up against the division? I mean, he always hits really well against the Yankees, hit 326 against them on the year this year, which is notable and important. I mean, the Yankees won the division, and if he can continue to rip them apart, that's going to be absolutely huge. But then you even look at the other teams in the division and how he hit against them, and his numbers against the rest of the division were not as good as they were against the Yankees. I mean, he hit 300 against the Blue Jays this year, which is still solid, but not that same number that he put up against the Yankees. 304 against the Orioles. Again, competitive, but not as good as he hit against the Yankees. Tampa Bay Rays, he only batted 180 against them. So they are a team that he tends to struggle against. But when you look at Devers overall as a whole, he hits pretty well against the division. And that's one of the biggest things for the Red Sox and him to be able to succeed in 2025 is, can he still consistently hit well against the entirety of the division, and can he figure it out against Tampa Bay? Is it something about Tropicana Field and he just doesn't like hitting there and he struggles there, which I don't blame him. I mean, that's not a great ballpark, but is it something about that place that makes it harder for him to be able to succeed there from an offensive standpoint? So that's one big thing I'm going to be looking at in Devers' game next season, is how is he adapting? Is he able to turn things around when he's facing Tampa Bay? And can he continue to hit well against the rest of the AL East? Because the Red Sox need to be able to beat their own division. And that's something that they have struggled with recently, is being able to consistently beat the other teams in their division. So if they can get Devers to be continuing to hit well against the division, that's going to be an absolute game changer for an offense that we did see a lot of inconsistencies from this year. So that's another big thing I'm going to be looking at with Devers, is can he stay hot at the plate when he's facing other AL East opponents, and can that drive the Red Sox to produce some more wins against their division this year? Because they had the Yankees number early on in the season, but then when things started to go south for the Red Sox in the later half, they ended up losing the series against the Yankees, and then didn't even come close against Baltimore. And then we're facing the Rays and the Blue Jays also, who weren't as good as the Red Sox this year, but Tampa Bay almost caught the Red Sox in the standings at the end of the season. So they have to be able to produce and perform against their own division, and Devers could be the fuel to them getting a lot of those wins based on how he hits in general against other AL East opponents. And coming up, what does Devers' presence and health mean for the Red Sox playoff chances in 2025? That's being discussed next. This episode of Locked On Red Sox is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com, Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. With hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival's city during postseason. Maybe it's time to taste test your baseball competition's stadium cuisine. Luckily, on Booking.com, you can find the stadium stay that's just right for you. With Booking.com's wide variety of choice across the U.S., you can go incognito to all your baseball rivals' cities. For example, I mean, the Yankees and Mets are both in the postseason right now. So if you always wanted to go to one of those ballparks or at least see that city, you could go to a playoff game at one of those ballparks and use Booking.com to find a place to stay, because I promise you it will give you a good deal. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Booking.com, Booking.yeah. I've used Booking.com for tons of stays in my day, and it really benefits me a lot. So I recommend that you do it as well. Also, check out FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel is great because you can bet on all different types of sports before games, during games. You can cash out at any time, and FanDuel will give you a good return for when you win a bet, or even if you don't win, you'll still get your money that you bargained, which is not even that much if you're smart about it. So just make sure that you're putting in small amounts to win lots of money, and it could absolutely change your life. So definitely download the FanDuel app. We are talking about Rafael Devers and the season that he had in 2024 and what it's going to mean for him and the Red Sox in 2025 if he's healthy. He is the heart of the Boston Red Sox lineup. He is the guy who is going to produce for this team and is going to be out there as long as he's healthy and put up the offensive numbers that the Red Sox need a guy who signed this massive contract extension to put up. And that, what I just said, is the key. If he's healthy, he's been battling the shoulder thing all season long. Can he get that under wraps over the course of this offseason and go into next season feeling better than ever so that he can just mash baseballs and be the Rafael Devers that we know he can be? Because we definitely weren't able to see the version of Devers that we had been used to seeing in the past this year, because he really struggled in situations that he doesn't usually struggle in. So I'm looking to see, okay, can Devers come back to being the guy that we've seen from him prior to 2024? Because you even look back at his prior seasons before this past year, and he was totally reliable. I mean, over the course of the season, when he wasn't battling a shoulder injury, he was able to be more effective, and his numbers were a little bit closer on the road versus at home. For example, he batted .279 at home in 2023 and .262 on the road that year. So there wasn't as much of a major discrepancy between his home and away numbers. And overall, he has been able to be consistent. But what we are going to be looking for from him, other than being able to come through in the clutch with runners in scoring position and also being able to improve his numbers when he's in a 2-strike count, he just needs to decrease those strikeout numbers a little bit more, because he does strike out at a pretty rough rate right now. And he was putting together tons of swing and miss at bats during the 2024 season. So one of the biggest things that he's going to have to be careful about next year is not swinging and missing as much, and hoping that he's able to make more hard contact once he's fully healthy. But if they do get a healthy Rafael Devers all season long, and he is at the heart of that lineup, it already increases the Red Sox playoff chances even more, because obviously a fully healthy Rafael Devers is a lot better than a not so healthy Rafael Devers. And when you think about the Red Sox lineup and the roster makeup right now, you would want Devers to be out there and be able to hit home runs, especially when there are runners on base. And that was one of the biggest things about Tyler O'Neill this past year with the Red Sox, was he would hit lots of home runs, but tons of them would be solo home runs when there were not runners on base. And it would be frustrating, because as great as solo home runs are, and as awesome as it is that it gets runs on the board for the Red Sox, you want to still be able to deliver with runners on base, because the solo home runs make it hard to climb back in a game when you're down by 4 or 5 runs and you're missing out on the opportunities with runners on. So Devers, in those situations, I definitely would like him to not strike out as much and be able to find a way to make more productive outs, as in, even if he hits a ground ball and he's out at first, but he advances base runners to second and third, that's at least a productive at bat, as opposed to striking out. So even focusing on making more contact in those types of situations, even if it's light contact, that is a productive at bat and can move a base runner into scoring position. That's something that we can see as a productive at bat from Devers. So that's a lot of what I'm looking for. And when you think about the Red Sox in the 2024 season they had and how frustrating it was as a whole, when you think about their chances for 2025, their playoff chances are going to come down to how they fix the roster and hopefully making tons of moves to do so. That's going to be a big thing. And also, it's going to be dependent on the health of their key players. And Devers is one of those players. If he is hitting the way that we've generally seen him hit throughout the course of his career, we will get a team that has a lot better of a chance to make the playoffs, because a lot of those big situations where Devers was up and the Red Sox squandered opportunities to score with him at the plate, if he comes through in just a few more of those situations this year, the Red Sox are probably looking at the playoffs. And that's the biggest thing for me, is it's not even huge adjustments that need to happen here with Devers. It's just a few little mechanical things in his game that I'm looking to say, okay, you need to fix these couple things and you are golden to be one of the best hitters in the league moving forward, because the skills and the foundation are definitely there, and the ability for him to be one of the best hitters in the game is certainly out there. It's just a matter of, is he able to make those changes during this offseason? Is the pain too excruciating to where he can't handle being able to hit and make those changes? Or is he going to go out there next year and be the Rafael Devers that we know he can be? It's going to be key to the Red Sox success and playoff chances, because you can't really just replace Devers' bat in the lineup. I mean, he's the heart of this Red Sox team. He has that massive contract extension. They're building him as the face of the franchise. And they're not just going to go out and say, okay, Devers is hurt, let's go replace him with somebody else in the lineup full time. That's just not how that goes. They just know they need Devers' bat in there. So because of that, he is going to be a big reason why the Red Sox make or do not make the playoffs. But again, I'm not saying it's obviously all on him. There are tons of things that the front office has to do this offseason to build a contending team again. And that's not Devers' fault or in Devers' control. Either the Red Sox build a contending team or they don't, and there's not much Devers can do if they don't. So he has to have the right pieces around him. But if he has the right pieces around him and he's not able to stay healthy or stay consistently out on the field, that's going to be a big noticeable loss for the Boston Red Sox, and it's going to be a void in the lineup that's going to be tough for this team to be able to stay consistent as they progress through the rest of their season. So he is one of, if not the most important player in the Red Sox 2025 season. Is he going to be able to deliver? Is he going to be able to be consistent? Is he going to be able to get his batting average above the 270 mark that he's been lingering in over the last couple seasons? Is he able to produce on a little bit more of a regular basis? Hopefully when they get to the bottom of this shoulder thing, we can find out, and it's good news as opposed to bad news, and that he's able to produce in the way we all know that he can. So make sure that while you're at it, after you listen to this show and we're talking all things playoffs, I appreciate you making Locked On Red Sox your first listen today, but for your second listen, you can find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every aspect of the playoff picture. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Sully is great. I have done a crossover show with him before, and he is awesome and super knowledgeable. So make sure you check out his show after this, wherever you get your podcasts. As always, keep the faith, go Red Sox, and I will catch you on the flip side.